All right, so you're not the traditional candidate. You made it farther than a lot of the traditional candidates have. Why do you think that is?
We've had a clear message from day one, Katie, that we need to solve the problems that got Trump elected. We're in the midst of this profound economic transformation, and we need to help our people move forward. I think we've done well because we've had that message the whole time, and we've been talking to American voters in a different language, a language of data and solutions, as opposed to political talking points.
You're up in these, what they're called pivot counties, counties that voted for Obama in 2008, 2012, and then switched for Trump in 2016. The last one we were in went for 20 for Obama in, I think, one of his elections, and then swung back 20 for Trump. That's a 40-point swing.
I know, it's profound.
I spoke to a couple mythical Republicans who are interested in Democrats there. Why do you think they like you?
Well, I'm talking about problems that they see around them every day. The fact that Amazon's closing 30% of our stores and malls and paying zero in taxes. The fact that we blasted away 40,000 manufacturing jobs right here in Iowa out of 4 million that were primarily based in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and the swing states. So when I talk about those problems, Republicans recognize them. They say, wait a minute, that is what happened in my community. And my message is fundamentally that these problems don't actually hew to any political party. That you can have truck drivers who are Democrats and truck drivers who are Republicans, and the robot truck is going to be a game changer for both of them.
So how do you solve it beyond just a universal basic income?
Well, we have a whole host of challenges ahead of us. Certainly the freedom dividend would be the most effective way to help Americans actually.
But it's just $12,000. That's not enough to live your life in a year.
It's not, but it's $12,000 times everyone in a community. So if you have a town like the one we just left that might have, let's call it 5,000 residents who are adults, that's an extra $5 million a month in that town that goes to car repairs and daycare expenses and Little League signups. So there are more opportunities on main streets where people actually live and work, and that helps us all actually have a path forward.
So you're saying it sustains jobs that already exist?
Yeah, and adds new ones, because how many Americans would do something a bit different if they had $1,000 a month coming in that they could rely on? They knew if they tried something different, it won't mean that they starve to death, that they don't have this existential threat. So there are many ways that we can help our people actually find a path forward in the 21st century economy. The most powerful is just putting money directly into our hands.
What about people who might say, hey, everyone's got $1,000 extra, so I'm going to charge $1,000 more in rent every month?
Well, it's hard to gouge us like that because we're still price sensitive. We're still budget conscious. Just because I have $1,000 a month doesn't mean if you stick it to me, I'll just be like, sure. So if all the landlords try to stick it to us, then we'd look up and say, wait a minute, if we get 4 people together, we can just buy that fixer-upper of a house. This income goes with us wherever we live. So this actually makes us harder to push around, not easier. Though we do need to have separate plans to bring down the costs in education, healthcare, and housing, because those are the 3 things that are driving Americans crazy right now. And they're not going up in price because we're doing so well. They're going up in price because those markets aren't functioning properly.
How do you sell it, though, to Americans who have long believed in a work ethic and who don't want a handout, who might see that as a handout? Americans who say, I want to earn every dollar I make. I don't want the government to give it to me.
Well, this is a bipartisan idea, and the one state that's had a dividend for almost 40 years is Alaska. It's a deep red conservative state passed by a Republican governor. And his argument to the people of Alaska was, who would you rather get the oil money? The government is going to mess it up somehow, or you? And the Alaskan people said, us, please. And he said, I thought so. And now it's wildly popular, has stood the test of time, has created hundreds, even thousands of jobs in Alaska.
What's to stop another administration coming in and saying, I'm going to get rid of the freedom dividend, and if that has taken away or eaten away at Social Security or other government benefits, getting rid of everything and just being a shortcut to entitlement reform?
Well, again, if you look at Alaska's experience, it has been there for almost 40 years across administrations because it's the most popular thing that the government does.
So that translates to the country?
Oh, so if you can imagine, after I'm president in 2021, we passed the freedom dividend. it's going to be everyone's favorite thing about the government. It's going to be the only thing they say, like, this is the one thing I can definitely get behind. And then after I'm president for 8 years, if someone else comes in and is like, I'm going to cut the dividend, people are going to be like, what are you talking about? That's the only thing that you do that we like. And so it's going to be very, very difficult for them to go back on this dividend, just like it has stood the test of time in Alaska, because it's universally popular.
Sort of like how hard it is to turn over Obamacare.
Well, you could make a comparison
They're trying
there. And that is another point, Katie, is that you're suggesting somehow that this dividend would make it easier to take things away from the American people. I would argue very much the opposite. It'll make things harder, because it'll make it so that Americans actually can participate and pay attention to what's going on in our democracy, as opposed to having this boot on our throats all the time.
What I keep hearing from Democrats is that the one overarching factor for Democratic voters is this desire to get Donald Trump out of office.
Yeah.
That is the animating reason for them to get out in caucus, to get out in primary, and to go to the polls
priority, for sure.
in November. Do you think that that is the right way to approach voters who may have voted for Trump in 2016, or voters who may not have voted at all in 2016?
Well, I think it's practical to say, look, we have to beat Donald Trump. And people are trying to figure out who the best candidate is for that job. I would argue that I'm easily the best candidate for that job, because I'm peeling off thousands of disaffected Trump voters, independents, and libertarians, as well as Democrats and progressives. One poll said that 10% of New Hampshire Trump voters would vote for me over Trump in the general. Another survey said that 18% of college Republicans would choose me over Trump. I have the clearest path to build a broader coalition to beat Donald Trump. And you know who knows this, Katie? Donald Trump. I am the only candidate in the field he has never tweeted about, because he knows his followers like me, and I'm better at the internet than he
Or
is.
maybe he just doesn't think you're relevant.
Oh, he knows that I'm his biggest threat. He said as much at a rally, where he said, the one thing that worries me is that some new non-politician comes out of nowhere to challenge me. And his advisor was quoted at a private event saying, if there's someone we're worried about, it's Yang. So they know I'm the opponent he does not want to see.
What do you say to those who like you and may agree with your policies, may have done that Washington Post quiz that says, who do you most align with? And you might have been their first choice. But when it comes to voting for you, they might think, I'm not sure he knows Washington enough. I'm not sure he'll know how to do the job if I give it to him.
Well, I would suggest that America has been casting about for some kind of change for quite some time. And you can see it not just, unfortunately, in Trump's election, but also in Bernie Sanders' outsized success, and even Barack Obama's victory in 2008. And Barack Obama's on the record saying that his 2 years as a senator had very little to do with training him to become president, and his first task was to anoint Joe Biden as his running mate, so he had a partner that knew Washington very well. That's exactly what I would need to do. I would need to build a team around me that has a lot of experience and connections in Washington, so we can get things done on day one.
What do you do about money's influence on Washington?
Yeah, right now, we know our government has been overrun by corporate interests. We have to do everything we can to actually restore our government to us, the people of this country. So one of my signal policies is democracy dollars of $100 for each voter, because right now only 5% of Americans contribute to a political candidate or campaign. A lot of us just don't have the disposable income to be donating money like that. So if you put 100 free democracy dollars in our hands, it would get that up tenfold, maybe to 50% immediately, and it would wash out the lobbyist cash by a factor of 4 or 5 to 1. I would overturn Citizens United if we can, but the reality is corporate money was having its way in D.C. before Citizens United, and it's going to be very, very hard to counteract that money unless we have this flood of people-powered money that can truly wash it out.
Half the country doesn't vote. Doesn't believe that it makes a difference, doesn't believe that it will affect their lives, doesn't trust people who are lawmakers or who want to be lawmakers. How do you get them invested in the system again? Is it possible?
It is possible, and I've seen it with our campaign, where we've energized many people who have not been actively engaged in politics at all. And there are a lot of them. I think last I saw there were 25% of Americans who actually describe themselves as politically disengaged. More Americans self-identify as independents than Democrats or Republicans by a really wide margin. So we have to get different types of Americans excited about our democracy again. And for those who say, hey, this has nothing to do with me, this is pointless, it's not going to affect my life, I understand, because if you tune into our politics, it really can be very alienating and exhausting and very, very negative. We have to reawaken a sense of optimism and spirit about the future if we're going to get Americans to pay attention.
The president's impeachment trial was on the TVs, on C-SPAN, on this bus. When you watch it, what do you think?
I think I wish that some more Republicans seemed open to this impeachment process, because you need 20 of them, and if you have 0 of them, then the whole thing seems like a foregone conclusion.
What do you think Americans see when they watch?
I think many of them think the exact same thing I just said, which is this feels like a ball game where I know what the score is going to be.
Do you think they watch it and think, I've got trust in either side?
Well, the unfortunate part is that because our Congress has become so dysfunctional, Americans on both sides of the aisle have just thrown up their hands. I think the last I checked, Congress's approval rating was something like 17%. So we have to turn that around. It's a very tall order. But one thing, I'd be for a bunch of things I think would help very, very quickly. Now, I think we should have term limits for members of Congress. I think they should be going to Capitol Hill to try and do work and then come home after a certain period of time. I think we need to restore earmarks to Congress so that they can actually horse trade and make deals, because right now, if there's a bill you don't like, there's nothing anyone can offer you that you can take home to your district and be like, look, I signed on, but I brought this goodie home. Mm-hmm. Let's just give back the earmarks.
Politics again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just reasonable where if you're going to make a deal with me, you need something to offer me, and it's very hard to offer a local legislator something if they're not allowed to have an earmark that's committed to their district.
Would you consider making voting mandatory?
I would like to have people get automatically registered to vote. When they get a driver's license, for example, it's like, hey, you're now registered to vote.
Not everyone has a driver's license.
Yeah, well, just make it easier at every level. I want to make Election Day a national holiday. I think that we need to try and make it so that it's pain-free and easy to vote, but I would not make it mandatory. I think that's a bridge too far.
Why?
Well, I think that, this country is about, in many ways, enabling our freedoms, and it doesn't seem appropriate to say you're not free not to vote.
Paid parental leave is something that I have an interest in. You are for it, but not for making small businesses offer paid family leave. What do you say to those workers who work for a small business who want 12 weeks home with their kid?
They should have 12 weeks home with their kid. It's unconscionable that we are one of only 2 countries in the world at this point that don't have paid family leave for new moms. And I've run a small business. We did give parental leave, but to the extent that businesses aren't in a position where they can pay for it, our society should enable it.
What about at a federal level?
Yeah, at the federal level, we should just say, look, we're a developed country. It's not bad for business to have moms spend time with their kids.
What about dads?
Dads? And it's called parental leave or family leave for a reason. You get it for both for parents of any gender, and you can actually stagger it so that means that you can have even more time with the child.
What day are you on this bus tour?
Let's see. It's a 17-day bus tour, and it started on Saturday, and today is Wednesday, so I believe that it's day 5.
Day 5. You've spent some time up here in the northern part of Iowa, where it's more of a red district, or red. Hold on. You spent more time in northern Iowa. It's a redder area than other parts of the state. What have you learned?
I've learned that the people in this part of Iowa have seen the challenges very, very personally. They understand why Iowa went to Trump by almost 10 points, and this is a purple state. They've seen their way of life change. They've seen their stores close, the factories close, and they all have friends and neighbors who are very, very excited about Trump's victory because they don't feel like our government's responsive. And to me, the Democratic Party needs to be laser focused on trying to make it so that those people believe that the solutions we're offering actually will improve their lives. Instead of just acting like Trump is the source of all of our problems, we should know that Trump is a symptom of a deeper disease, and the Democrats have to get to work trying to cure that disease.
In order to win Iowa, you got a caucus. The room you were just in, it was a couple dozen people. One guy drove from California. Are you getting enough people to caucus for you in the state to come in to finish strong enough to give you the momentum for New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina?
Yeah, we're growing all the time here in the state. We're really excited about the momentum we have, and we're excited about the fact that, I think at this point, almost 1,000 volunteers have come in from California and other parts of the country to knock on doors. I mean, if they show up here and they canvass and talk to Iowans, that's a huge game changer. That's the sort of thing that other campaigns wish that they had. So we're really optimistic and confident about the fact that we're growing very quickly here in the state. I actually heard from someone who knows the state very well. He said, I think that you're going to surprise a lot of people on February 3rd.
How do you feel about being left the state because Klobuchar, Warren, and Sanders are on jury duty?
Yeah, I felt bad for them. I mean, I wish that they had the freedom to campaign. That's actually one of the things I do think when I see the impeachment coverage is I think like, I feel bad for Amy and Bernie and Elizabeth and Michael Bennett.
Yeah, that's true. Didn't need to wave them out. Anything that I didn't ask that you want to get in?
Well,
I mean, I could go on talk about nuclear power and the environment, talk about cybersecurity.
I would. I mean, one of the points that and I think we touched on a lot of them, I suppose. It's like we don't talk about the essence of the campaign, which is, I think that is something that we talked about before, which is how are we going to solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected and beat Donald Trump? And some people are saying, hey, if we get like a really experienced DC figure, then that will restore everything to normal. And to me, that's underestimating the lessons from Trump's victory. I mean, if DC was working for people, then Trump never would have won. And so the question is, are we going to respond to Trump's victory with business as usual? Or are we going to respond to Trump's victory with a vision for the future that actually gets Americans excited and gives us all a path forward?
Who do you think your stiffest competition is in the Democratic field?
Well, I'm a numbers guy, so you just look up at the front runners and say, they're the front runners until proven otherwise. And a lot of it is that many of them are household names that have very, very high levels of familiarity and recognition. What our numbers have shown is that the more people find out about me, the more excited they get. And so our challenge is really to introduce me to as many Iowans and Americans as possible in as short a time period as possible.
Just a final question. What do you say to those who might look at the campaign and think it's a bit too bro-y for them?
Well, I think that everyone knows that we've run a very human campaign and that we have to just interact with voters in a very natural way that sort of lets who we are be clear to people. But I also think people can very clearly see that I'm a dad. I've got 2 boys, one of whom is on the autism spectrum, that my wife Evelyn is an incredible role model and partner, and someone I'm thrilled to have with me on the trail. I think we reflect the realities of many, many American families, and the fact that my campaign seems like it's having a good time at times. I don't think that's a bad thing to many, many Americans.
Best campaign memory so far?
Best campaign memory. Wow, there's so many. I mean, I'm a big Dave Chappelle fan, so meeting with him and getting his endorsement was a very exciting moment. Talking to anytime an Iowan says I'm caucusing for you, I actually literally jump for joy. So that's like a thrill that I hopefully will get right now after the stop, and we get one every time we stop someplace. There have been so many incredible memories. I'd say recently it really was the outpouring of support for Evelyn after her story came out last week about her being assaulted by her doctor, and just there's been so much love and warmth and gratitude for her that it's been an incredibly touching period for me and her and the entire family.
Thanks so much. We're here.
Yes, we are. Let's go win some Iowans. Caucus, Feb 3.
Do you understand how the caucus works? Do you get it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
I am a numbers guy.
Explain it to me. How does it work?
Sure. So there are something like 16 to 1,700 different caucus locations around the state. And then you go to your caucus location, show up, and then you stand around and say, hey, I support this candidate, I support that candidate. If your candidate gets more than 15%, then you are frozen in place. If your candidate gets less than 15%, then you are asked to reassign yourself.
So you literally run across the high school gym and join the the team that you like second best.
Yes, that's right.
And then maybe third best until they come up with one winner.
Well, I think after you get realigned, then at that point, if everyone's above the threshold, and they just count you. But there can be some time between the realignment. So after you stand there, and then if your candidate's below 15%, then people can have a very long and prolonged discussion about why you should go stand.
Are you going to go to a caucus?
To the places. I think we've been talking about what it is.
Have you seen a caucus in action before?
I've seen what like a caucus, looks like when in like a simulation. But I mean, I wasn't here 4 years ago, and so I haven't had an opportunity. But
it can get kind of rowdy. Ask these guys; they were at one last time.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, you know who's really passionate and dedicated? Andrew Yang supporters. Yeah, they'll be like, come to the Yang gang, join
and
us.
They literally have to convince their
neighbors
to say, hey, listen, I like this guy for this reason, that reason, and the other reason, come join us.
Yeah.
There's active convincing going on. They'll be campaigning for you.
Yes, it's going to be very exciting. What a time. Democracy in action. It's one of the only places where democracy can actually have this kind of role.
I was talking to a cab driver my first night here, and he said he's just disgusted with Washington, but he said, I believe in democracy. It's thriving if you look around at Iowa.
Iowa is definitely
into the caucus.
A very, very, very clear example of where people take the democracy incredibly seriously and much to heart. Yeah. Much more so than anything I've experienced. I mean, New Hampshire's right there, too. But the process is a little bit more customary, where it's a primary, you go vote.
You go vote,
yeah. It's less convince the neighbor, though you do convince the neighbor ahead of time, where you're trying to get them to vote for your candidate.
You gotta do retail politics there. You gotta sit on someone's couch.
Yeah, happily I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy talking to Americans. If you don't, then I think this process would be very, very difficult.
Wait, if Donald Trump wins again, what does it say about America?
Unfortunately, I think a lot of it will have to do with who we run against him. It's like I think the goal is to make it so Donald Trump does not win another term, but I think his victory is something that we can't rule out. It's one reason why we have to put the right person against him and then rally around that person.
Team, subscribe for more of these type of videos.